Slowly start to get going here as a few more people roll in. Uh, Thanks again for coming. I am Jesse Chervenka. I am the bereavement coordinator here at the Crisis Center of BC. I run the programming specifically for suicide grief here. We'll go over some more of our services later on in the webinar, as well as some other really helpful resources for people. Um, yeah, we are going to be talking about grief today. At the Crisis Center, we do focus more on suicide, but this webinar in particular is, very helpful for anyone grieving any type of loss or anyone who wants to support someone who's grieving any type of loss. So yeah, I really think you'll find this helpful, and appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come learn something like this. So, and bear with me, I've got a bit of a cough, so I may be coughing a bit and drinking some water. Okay, so yeah, let's get started. Understanding grief. Okay, so the mission I have here is just to help teach people about grief. There's a lot of stigma and discomfort around grief, as any grieving person will know from their experiences. My hopes today is to reduce this and to help people feel a bit more comfortable supporting grief. And for people who are grieving to feel a little bit more comfortable kind of supporting themselves or navigating this grief journey. Again, at the Crisis Center, we do focus on suicide grief, but I really wanted to make this webinar accessible to anyone grieving any type of loss. So there'll be a lot of relevant information here for anyone. Um, we're here for an hour and a half, but we're going to take a bit of a break in between, and then we'll leave some room at the end for questions as well. So this webinar was initially created before the horrible tragic events at the Lapu Lapu Festival in Vancouver. But I did notice that some people joined. There was an influx of people joining after this tragedy, so I did add some pieces in here that are relevant to people grieving this type of tragic and traumatic loss as well. Yeah, so the Crisis Center of BC, along with the Vancouver Hospice Society, is putting on this webinar, and we have a lot of great resources to offer that I'll also be talking about at the end of this presentation. So yeah, I wanted to also start by just saying we are talking about a lot of triggering things in this webinar. We'll be talking about trauma. We'll be talking about suicide, obviously talking about grief. So if you are feeling overwhelmed or activated or just having a really difficult time, I just want to give you permission to really just be present with what you're going through and take the space you need for yourself. So if this is feeling like too much, if it feels like it's bringing too much back for you, you can always come back into the webinar if you want to take a little break. We'll let you back in. You can also just leave the webinar and take care of yourself. This is the Crisis Center of BC, so we also just a couple offices down from me here. We have the people answering the 988 phones, and they are there 24/7. You can call 988, call or text, and they are incredibly supportive and helpful. Um, yeah, feel free to call them anytime if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling activated. We also have a lot of good resources that I'll be sending out to everyone via email after this webinar as well. Yeah. So, okay. With that being said, let's get started. Um, okay. This is very much a crash course on a lot of basic sort of aspects of grief. I understand that it is a lot to take in all at once. But just understand, some of it will stick. You don't have to remember everything here, but, I think you will find a lot of this helpful and you will remember it after. Um, oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're going to talk about grief in general. We're going to talk about trauma. We're going to talk about guilt, which is, obviously a big part of grief, no matter what type of loss you're grieving. We're going to talk about some of the cultural influences on grief. We're going to talk about self-care. And we're going to talk about very, specific, concrete ways that you can help people. Uh, as a community coming together to support people individually and as well as supporting children and adolescents through grief. And we also have a lot of great resources to provide that I will talk to you about as well. So we'll start by just getting a better understanding of grief. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention, I've got with me Mark Sheehan here. He is supporting as well. So feel free to ask him any questions in the Q&A component of the Zoom here. And he can answer, he's there for support. He can answer technical questions as well. So if you're having any issues hearing me or you need to be let back in, he will support with that. So feel free to just put any questions you have in there and he will answer them, maybe more like technical questions around navigating this webinar and navigating Zoom. And then at the end, I will prompt you. You can ask some questions more about grief that I will answer myself. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for helping with that. Okay, continuing on, we'll, yeah, make some space to understand grief a bit more generally here. So what can grieving people expect? So grief shows up in really just an infinite amount of ways physically. There's really I've heard of so many things being experienced after grief. Maybe some more common ones are a lot of those symptoms that you might associate with anxiety, that feeling of panic, that sort of pit in your stomach, a tightness of chest, difficulty breathing, um, aches and pains, even rashes, um, and a lot of symptoms as well that are associated with depression too. Grief tends to really exacerbate a lot of things that we're already experiencing as well. So in terms of mental and emotional, really, anything can be expected. Anything is normal. Guilt, we'll talk more about that. Relief, feeling completely numb and detached, feeling like, the things you used to do, you just can't do anymore, including work, things that you used to enjoy. Um, People call this grief brain, which is incredibly common, but just having a really hard time remembering anything. Um, Unable to concentrate, like your short-term memory just changes like drastically after grief. Nightmares, depression, panic, this is all very common. There's no right or wrong way to grieve, and I really want to highlight that throughout this webinar. Yes, I really love this image here because it breaks down a really pervasive model that has been in our sort of zeitgeist, our cultural understanding of grief for a very long time, which is the Kubler-Ross model of grief. And not to say there's, necessarily anything wrong with this model, but it was taken completely out of context and added into grief. So it kind of tells us that we have to go through these linear stages and makes us feel bad, if we're not reaching certain milestones at certain points, or it makes us feel like we're regressing if we're experiencing certain things again. And I really just like to take a moment to completely dispel this. There really is no right or wrong way to grieve. There's no linear stages to grief. Um, However you're feeling is completely normal. I also work as a grief counselor at the Vancouver Hospice Society, and I've heard of people who are wondering if they're doing something wrong because they're experiencing a stage before the one that they're at now, and this model really has gotten into our culture a lot around grief, and yeah, I really just want to break that down. This is not how you need to be feeling about grief. This is not helpful and it's not accurate as well. Um, so yeah, again, there's no right or wrong way to feel in the face of loss. I want to highlight the word feel there for a moment because it is important to feel grief. Grief demands to be felt. Feeling it is really the way through grief. Um, and I also want to acknowledge that grief is incredibly painful and difficult at times too. And it is absolutely normal to find ways to distract ourselves through grief, to push grief aside when we're able to for a moment so we can focus on what we're doing and find distractions that allow us to just step away from that pain for a moment. That is absolutely normal. What can make things, difficult is when grief is pushed down for, really extended periods of time, months, years, then grief can find other ways to really pop back up into our life that may be more harmful and more destructive. So, it is important to, when you're able to make space to feel that grief. Okay. Um, Grief bursts. Yeah, these are, as people who are grieving know, these are extremely intense, sort of emotional um, pits of like heavy grief that just sink into us. And sometimes there's a trigger, it might be a smell or a photograph or a taste that reminds us of our person. Other times it might come up just completely unexpectedly. Um, Much like a panic attack, these do subside. You can breathe through it, remind yourself that this will pass. But I also just want to make space to let you know that these are very normal and part of the grieving process. Um, Secondary losses. Yeah. So these are you can imagine these as the ripple effects for grief to that initial loss. And this might be the loss of identity as a daughter, the loss of future you had hoped for with your person. Um, you know, uh, you wished your father was able to see you get married. You wished your partner could see your child grow up. These things are incredibly devastating and painful, and just as important as that initial loss to recognize and talk about and grieve. And yeah, space needs to be made for these losses as well. So, uh, you may have heard of this term, disenfranchised grief. I'd like to take a moment to just tell you about this. So it is if the circumstance of your loss has led to others, criticizing you, judging you, or you kind of get the message that This is something people don't want to talk about. You kind of get the feeling that you have to sort of grieve alone and you can't talk about it, and it kind of complicates the loss. Um, and there's, maybe there's stigma around this type of loss. This can cause people to feel ashamed, to hide their grief, and as a result, they're not able to make as much space for this grief. And it makes it a lot more difficult. All of this added on to the already heavy weight of grief. Some losses that may be disenfranchised, as an example, are suicide, overdose. Maybe someone died that no one knew you had like a close relationship with. A lot of different things can cause a loss to become disenfranchised. Um, okay, invalidating and harmful myths. Um, I really like this slide. I think it's really important to go over because there is a lot of myths that are sort of ingrained into our culture and then become ingrained into the way that we're grieving or the way that we understand grief, and make it harder to sort of like process and express and work through that grief. So I just like to take a moment to break those down. Um, the pain will go away if you ignore it. People say that. It's not true. As I spoke about before, it is the way through grief is to feel it. It's important to stay strong. This, yeah, I really have a hard time with this one because I hear it a lot and it really breaks my heart when people say, oh, I have to stay strong, or I've been told that I have to stay strong. So, and it's usually in the context of, I have to hide my emotions, I have to hide my tears, I can't let people know how I'm feeling. And this is really rooted in our grief denying culture. Um, and, in reality, I think it is actually a very strong thing to to allow yourself to cry, to allow yourself to express those emotions. That is a very difficult and strong thing to do. So, I just want to break that down a little bit. It's really tough when people are told they need to stay strong, when in reality, it is a lot more helpful, for people to have this space where they can open up about their grief. When you're grieving, you can't laugh or be happy. This is obviously not true. Grief lasts a few months to a few years. There really is no timeline to grief. People will be grieving forever. Uh, you know, Generally grief does, the intensity, the debilitating nature of it does subside, or get lesser over time, but we will always hold that person in our heart. There will always be, a pain around that loss. um, the goal of grief is to get over it. That this is another thing that's kind of ingrained into our culture. um, Grief, as I just said, isn't something you really ever get over. um, Grief and crying are signs of weakness. You should hide your grief when you're around others. I think people, kind of said this because they themselves have a hard time making space for other people's emotions. You can't be angry at the person you lost. Obviously, this is very normal and okay to be angry at the person you lost. You need to keep busy when you're grieving. It's okay to sometimes keep busy when if you need to distract yourself, but you don't need to, always be pushing things away by keeping busy. Um, you grieve less if the person you lost was elderly and lived a long life. This just isn't true. There's so many components to grief, what makes grief more intense. And, everyone deserves to feel exactly how they're feeling, no matter what type of loss they have. If you don't cry after the death of a loved one, it means you don't really care. Again, there truly are some people that, you know, just don't really cry to process through things. I say this carefully because there are also people who have been told that crying is weak, and this may be a reason that they're not crying. And if you're one of those people, then crying can sometimes help. But there are also people who, need to do like specific strategic things to work through their loss, and tears aren't necessarily helpful for them. So if you're one of those people too, that is absolutely completely all right as well. Um, when you're grieving, you want to be left alone. You don't want your friends or family members to talk about the loss, of course. This isn't true. And it really breaks my heart to realize that this is what a lot of people think, who are supporting uh, grieving people. So they really never bring that their grief. They never ask people how they're doing. They never talk about their person who they lost. So yeah, I really like to dispel these myths. Um, when you grieve, you only grieve for the person you lost. This isn't true. We spoke about secondary losses. Um, Eventually, you should stop talking about the person you lost, get rid of their belongings, take down their photos of them because it just makes you sad. Yeah, it really stems in our sort of like discomfort with certain emotions in our culture. Um, and this absolutely isn't true. Memorializing that person, keeping them close, continuing that relationship even after death is really important. Okay. Okay, so what not to say. This is a really helpful slide too. So there's a lot of platitudes that people tend to say. They're generally rooted in this sort of discomfort. Let me just take a sip of water. They're generally rooted in this discomfort we have with grief in our culture. It's kind of a way of being like, I don't want to see you sad. I kind of want to make you happy, or try and remove this feeling so I don't have to sit with it. I don't have to be around with it. So I'm just gonna kind of say this thing to try and help and just change the subject. Um, so, everything happens for a reason. At least they're not suffering anymore. It was their time. You have to be strong. Time heals all wounds. They wouldn't want you to be sad. I know exactly how you feel. Yeah, it's even, if it's better not to say that. You'll feel better soon. It's been a while. Aren't you over it yet? They had a good life. You still have so much to be grateful for. Really all of these are just kind of minimizing feelings when these feelings really need to be normalized and given space rather than brushed away. So, um, yeah, what does it mean to hold space for someone who's grieving? It means being there with them despite the discomfort. We've been taught, for a long time that some feelings are difficult, or we need to push them away, or we need to immediately make them better. With grief, you feel a lot of really difficult things for a really long time. So if you're someone who's supporting someone with grief, being able to sit with those emotions is really helpful rather than changing the subject or trying to move past it. And if you don't know what to say, that's all right too. But just being there, and maybe you might just say like, I'm not sure what to say right now, but I'm here for you. Yeah. Um, okay. Uh, you have rights as a grieving person. Um, and I really like to highlight these. You have the right to talk about your grief, to search for meaning, to find people that are, genuinely willing to listen to your grief and to what you want to talk about to help you through this. Um, uh, yeah, to feel a multitude of emotions, to experience your own unique grief, be tolerant of your physical and emotional limits. This is a really big one. It's our culture is so much of our value is dependent on, kind of like how productive we are, and after grieving, it is like our body is just screaming at us to take care of ourselves. Your limits change entirely what you're able to do. Maybe the thing you are doing for work feels completely impossible after grief, even though you've only gotten like 2 weeks of leave or something like that, and you have the right to take care of yourself. And I know, it's sometimes easier said than done, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in self-care as well. But whenever you're able to, you have the right to just take care of yourself, to give yourself that space to say, I can't come to this right now. I just got to be there for myself right now. Um, Yeah, moving towards grief and healing, treasuring your memories, remembering your person, talking about your person, experiencing those grief bursts, embracing spirituality if that feels right for you, making use of ritual. And I'll send these out in an email to everyone in depths because they're really helpful. I really like them a lot. I have people put them up on their fridge. Um, okay. So suicide, there's a lot of stigma around suicide. So I just like to take a moment to just make some space for that, and how we think about suicide, because there's a lot of really harmful ways that our culture thinks about suicide. Um, so people who die by suicide are in a deep amount of overwhelming pain, and they feel utterly hopeless, to the point where it is impossible for them to see any escape route to their suffering. Um, and they didn't choose to die by suicide because um, they don't care, or they're selfish. It's they were truly doing the best they could with the unbearable weight they were carrying, and their death is not a reflection of how much love they have for their people or their worth. Um, so yeah, I just want to put that out there, and kind of shift that way of thinking about suicide. Um, that being said, those who are grieving suicide, it is absolutely normal to feel angry, to feel devastated, to feel so frustrated and hurt by what someone has done by ending their life to suicide as well. Um, Suicide grief is unique in the sense that there are a lot of really difficult aspects that come along with it, including that, it's often violent, traumatic, sudden. There is that what if, that guilt, should I have done something? Should I have done more? And we'll talk about that. We have a section on guilt. Um, Feeling really hurt by that person who died, and how they chose to end their life. Um, this fear of being judged by our culture. This is absolutely normal. There's a lot of stigma around suicide in our culture. Some cultures, especially, there's so much stigma that people have to hide the fact that their person died by suicide. Talk about that more too. Um, People not knowing what to say and kind of avoiding your grief entirely because there's so much discomfort around suicide and around grief, and just struggling to make sense of that person's life with how they died. Excuse me. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about trauma for a moment here. And this is, also connected to, the horrible events at the recent Lapu Lapu festival in Vancouver. What makes a loss traumatic? That suddenness and its unpredictability, this feeling of helplessness that comes afterwards, this disruption to one's sense of safety. Um, it often really shatters people's sense of safety and control. um, an intense sort of emotional reaction to this loss, and this like traumatic stress that really gets trapped and stuck in our body and makes the grief even more difficult. I'm just noticing some few, maybe it looks like people are asking some questions, and I just want to make note that whatever you do put in there in the Q&A component of the Zoom, I will be looking at the end, and I will try and make space for that. So whatever you want to put in there, I will also leave some time to ask some questions too. Um, so some signs that you may be experiencing, or your person may be experiencing trauma after grief. These are maybe some intrusive thoughts or flashbacks bringing you back to this really distressing memory, avoiding certain things. So you aren't triggered back into these really traumatic memories. um, Feeling just completely numb and detached, which is something our body can do to protect us from like an immense amount of pain and suffering. Um, and it often we feel that trauma in our nervous system, and it leads to this sort of like fight or flight kind of hypervigilance, sleep troubles, this deep sort of tension throughout our body. um, Incredibly difficult, and adds a lot of weight onto someone's grief. Um, so okay, so and it can also really complicate the grieving process because we're stuck in that state of shock and fear and trauma, and we aren't able to move on to processing this grief in the same way, which can be really difficult. We're sort of it freezes the grieving process. So how do we support that? Um, it is really important to seek out uh, trauma-informed therapists that have those certifications, that have those trauma-sensitive, trauma-informed training and skills, and know what they're doing. Modalities like EMDR, somatic therapy. Um, there's no timeline to this type of grief. You need to be gentle with yourself. You might notice that your limits have completely changed. You feel like a different person. You need to really take care of yourself during this time, and seek that like that skilled professional support. Okay. Um, so let's make a little bit of space for guilt here, because this is something that comes up a lot, really in any type of grief. I've seen it show up pretty much in every person who's grieving, more or less. So uh, something that's really important to remember is we can be very, very tough on ourselves. But this guilt is often not a reflection of what we've done wrong, but more of how much we love our person and just wanted to take care of them, and help them from their suffering or keep them safe. And this is what this guilt is truly rooted in. So there's this judgment. Uh, I should have done more. What is it based in? I love them and I wanted to keep them safe. We might tell ourselves that we failed them, and really we just hope, we wish we could have been there. We wish we could have, um, saved them and supported them from something really difficult. Um, yeah, again, we can be so tough on ourselves, and this guilt isn't necessarily accurate or fair or a reflection of what we've done wrong. Um, okay. Um, when supporting someone through this type of guilt, um, not to invalidate it, um, but letting people know that they're not alone in these thoughts, and it is again often rooted in their deep love for their person. There's this Buddhist idea, don't shoot the second arrow. So the first arrow will be that initial heartbreak, that loss of our special, cherished person. And that second arrow is the pain we add on top of that, that blame, that shame, that judgment, that guilt we direct at ourselves. Um, okay, and it's important to try and focus on that first pain because that's where that guilt is coming from as well. Um, and it makes sense. It makes sense to feel this guilt, but it's also really important to recognize where it stems from and to be kind to ourselves. Um, I like this method. It's called RAIN. It is an emotional mindfulness model. So you're recognizing the feeling that's coming up. In this situation, we're speaking of guilt. You're allowing it to be there without trying to fix it or push it away. And then you're investigating gently, kind of getting a little bit more curious about it. So how would you do that? You investigate the story a little bit. What am I telling myself right now? Maybe you're telling myself yourself, it's all my fault. I should have done more. Where is that belief coming from? Maybe I feel powerless. I didn't know how to help. I loved them so much. I wish I could have stopped whatever they were going through. But you need to ask yourself really, is this judgment helping me? Is this judgment fair? Is it the whole story? Am I blaming myself for something, I couldn't control? I did the best I could with what I had. It's important to be fair with yourself and investigate where these feelings come from and trying to avoid shooting that second arrow as much as possible. And then, continuing to nurture yourself with kindness and care. Okay, so let's move on here. And so cultural influences on mourning. Mourning is our outward expression of grief, and grief is, that painful feeling after someone we love or someone has died. Um, so you could truly write like, 100 theses on this topic. There's so many ways that different cultures mourn and different traditions, the way they express their grief. So I'm just going to keep it really basic and short and something that really can apply to anyone and any culture. And this is really becoming a continuous learner and avoiding that expert mindset. Um, Asking someone if you're supporting someone who's grieving, from a different culture, are there traditions or practices that feel important to you? Not just kind of assuming that they may be wanting to do the same things or experiencing the same things you may if you were grieving. Um, how can I support in a way that feels aligned with your beliefs, your traditions? Maybe how has your background or your religion influenced the way you're feeling about grief, or you want to express your grief? Yeah. So just really, asking, not assuming, being open to adapting your approach, being present and open-minded, being a continuous learner. Again, there are some, speaking about suicide specifically, there are some cultures that are very highly stigmatize suicide to the point that, people have to hide that their person died by suicide. How do you support in this situation? Just being really validating and acknowledging what they're going through, emphasizing that you don't hold any stigmas around suicide. You're not going to judge, and letting people decide what they feel comfortable sharing, not pushing them too much, and letting them sort of take the steps that feel right for them when sharing with you. Okay, okay. So let's shift gears here over to trauma-informed care, preventing re-traumatization. Okay, so people who are experiencing traumatic grief, and you're supporting someone through that. This is also relevant for people who are grieving a traumatic loss. It's important to know that it is possible to inadvertently make things worse, and we want to avoid doing that. So what are some general ways we can avoid that? Oh, okay. Someone asked to see the previous slide again. Let me just go back for 1 second. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. So how do we avoid re-traumatizing? This occurs when someone's re-exposed to a trauma through, something such as a memory, a situation, maybe an interaction that's sort of evoking that initial traumatic experience, what we'd call a trigger. Um, and this can include like a detailed discussion of how someone died. There's lots of things that may be a very strong reminder of this death. Um, what to watch for when you're supporting someone. So what might this look like? These common symptoms of just not being present in their own body anymore, being in more of a fight or flight state. Ideally, you'd want to back off before this point. Um, but if you're noticing some of these things coming up, it's important to think, okay, what are we talking about right now? Maybe we can take a break. We can focus on our breathing. We can try and do something to be a bit more present. You might notice someone kind of checking out, stop making eye contact, shallow breathing, fidgeting, seeming really tense, becoming, visibly emotional, highly emotional, more than usual. Um, I like to make a little space for language here as well, and not to say that, using the wrong word, would trigger someone into being re-traumatized, but it's important to use the right language to help people feel, like they're in a comfortable and safe atmosphere when talking about grief. There's a lot of sort of unconscious biases about suicide that have made their way into how we discuss suicide in specific. Um, and I just want to make a little caveat here that everyone, you know, messes up from time to time. I'm a therapist, and even I, might say commit suicide, by accident sometimes. So it's not like, you're a bad person for saying that, or you've done something wrong. It's just, something we do want to slowly start shifting, because these words are rooted in something, quite harmful. For example, he committed suicide is from when it was illegal to try and end your life. So it's kind of, connecting it to as if they're doing something criminal. Um, Failed an attempt. Um, this is kind of like assuming that it would be successful if they ended their life. So we don't want to assign that kind of value to it. Um, uh, you know, just keeping it simple. They died by suicide. They lost their life to suicide. Again, successful, unsuccessful attempt. Um, Completed, failed suicide. We don't talk about it like that. Just matter of fact, suicide attempt is either fatal or non-fatal. And again, if you say committed suicide, if you say failed attempt, you can just say, oops, and then just correct yourself, and that's fine. Um, it's important not to shy away from the word suicide, because this is really what adds that kind of like the tenseness, that stigma to it, that thing that keeps people feeling uncomfortable around talking about it or opening up around it or supporting suicide grief. So, you can say the word suicide. That goes for people, if you're talking to someone who's experiencing thoughts of suicide, or you're talking to someone who's grieving after a suicide, don't be afraid to use that word. Reducing pressure. So yes, when people are traumatized, helping them feel just safe and comfortable and not pressured is really important. Um, so so not pushing for more than they're ready for, letting them share at their own pace, avoiding comments like you need to talk about this, trusting that their silence, their tears, their laughter, or them distracting themselves is all normal, respecting their need for space without taking it personally, and being open to feedback. If a grieving person tells you, this isn't really helpful, or I need more of this, just being open to that and supporting them in a way that helps. That choice and control. When someone's experiencing a traumatic loss, they, they feel sort of like they don't have that control. They feel, really helpless and disconnected and out of control. And giving them this sense of control is really important. So giving them options, rather than, maybe let's talk right now, or, would you rather go for a walk? Do you want to chat, or do you want to just sit here together? Asking people permission, getting that consent. Is it okay if I check in with you again next week? Letting them guide the pace. Take your time. We don't have to talk about anything you're not ready for right now, and just respecting when they need space or when they say no. Um, yeah, this is a really critical one. Um, if for multiple reasons, if someone's grieving a suicide death, don't ask them what happened. This can reliving this can re-traumatize someone. It's also just not nice to ask someone these specific questions around any death, regardless of how their person died. Let them, if uh, if it's not a suicide death, let them, tell you if they want to. But this isn't something you should be asking. If it is a suicide death, even in the situation where they may want to tell you more about it. Sometimes it's helpful just to remind them as well. I'm here for you, and I want to make sure you're not reliving something that's going to be too hard for you to go back into right now. Um, yeah, once people start talking about that death, it can be really re-traumatizing and triggering and put someone into a really sort of fight or flight state that is difficult to get out of. Um, Again, we've just got two slides. I'm realizing we're at the halfway point. We've got two more slides, and then we're going to take a little break. So another important piece of supporting around re-traumatize or supporting to avoid re-traumatization is helping people feel accepted. It creates this sense of safety and comfort, and it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone is just making them feel like they're accepted and they belong. What does this look like? You don't need to be okay right now. I'm here with you however you are. I'm going to sit with you no matter how you're feeling. You know, there's no deadline for grief. Go at your own speed. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're feeling is valid. You're not alone. It's understandable that you feel this way. Strength-based approach. Okay, so I say this with the caveat that it's important not to skip over the feelings. You don't want to right away, say something like, "Oh, you're tough. You'll get through this." But it is at times important to help remind people how strong and resilient they are, like what's helped you get through those already tough, really tough moments in your life, and helping, them connect things that have worked in the past with what they're experiencing now. And just highlighting that strength, just noticing it, noticing how much capacity and strength that they have. Okay. So this next section rather, is how you can support, and this is a really important one. I think you're going to find this really helpful. This is going to go into all those specific ways that you can, really support, yourself through grief, but as well as supporting those people around you through grief as well. Some concrete ways of doing that. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes here. Let's take 5 minutes. And then, so it's 6:51. We'll do 6:56. We'll meet you back here, and we will get started on the second half here. And again, thank you so much for everyone who's attending. I'm really grateful you're here, learning about this with me. So yeah, we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll keep going, and then at the end we'll make space for some questions as well. Thanks again. I'll shut off my camera. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Welcome back. Um, I'm just going to take a little uh, quick peek at the chat here for a second, and again, I will be answering some questions at the end. Okay, and I noticed someone here has said that the Filipino community has asked that we stop referring to the recent Vancouver tragedy as the Lapu-Lapu Festival tragedy, as they want to maintain the joyful celebration of the Lapu-Lapu Festival, maybe instead saying the April 26th tragedy in Vancouver. Um, thank you very much. Actually, that is really helpful. I really appreciate you mentioning that. Um, and that makes complete sense. So yeah, I appreciate that. The April 26th tragedy in Vancouver. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. We will get started now again, and we're going to talk about some specific ways that you can support. So, um, so I've learned some very specific ways to support grieving people through looking at the literature around what grieving people genuinely need. Um, the highest need that has been reported by grieving people is this emotional support, this presence without fixing. People who just show up and just listen, who are not afraid to say their loved one's name, who are open to asking them, how their grief is going, making space for some of these difficult feelings, um, uh, checking in, months later, not just right after the death of their person. Um, you know, um, I'm Something you can say is, I'm here whether you want to talk or not. Um, if you're feeling, and it's normal to feel uncomfortable. I really want to normalize that. Uh, if we feel uncomfortable around grief, it's not because we're doing something wrong. It's just because this is what our culture has taught us. We live in a death and a grief denying culture. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's okay. What's helpful to learn is to be able to sit with that discomfort. And you might even say that, like, I don't really know what to say in this situation. I just want to let you know I'm here for you. I'm willing to listen. Um, and you don't even need to people get this like kind of sense of tension, like I gotta say the right thing, I gotta say the perfect thing here to make everything okay. You don't. You can just tell people like, that sounds really hard. I'm here for you. And just, you don't even have to say anything. You can just listen. And people will really appreciate that. Sitting through that awkwardness, what feels, awkward or discomfortable. Um, so, okay. So, acts of emotional caring and instrumental support were rated as the next most important. And this includes rather just continuing to reach out through phone calls, texts, visits, cards. Uh, when people are in the depth of their grief, it is very difficult to take care of yourself, to take care of all the things around you. Like cooking a healthy meal can feel uh, completely impossible when you can barely move from the heavy weight of grief. So bringing someone a meal is, incredibly thoughtful and helpful, meaningful. Offering to help with some of the tasks and chores that are piling up around them, childcare, housework. Um, A lot of people, we've all heard that before. You're like, let me know if you need anything. Um, People often don't take this as like, oh, okay, I can talk to this person if I need something and I'll ask them for, they think like, okay, well, I don't want to bug them, so it's a little bit more helpful to get specific, like, what can I do to help? I really do want to help. Can I take out your garbage? Can I bring you a meal? Um, can I do something, getting a little bit more specific. Appraisal support is next. Um, so this is being around people who understand that grief. And this can look like joining a support group. We'll talk more about that. We actually run a support group here at the Crisis Center and several support groups at the Vancouver Hospice Society, that are actually free as well. Um, so yeah, joining support groups, joining events for grieving people who understand your loss, and feeling less alone and isolated in that grief as a response, becomes really helpful through that grieving process. Some common failures in support. Um, maybe that's not the right word, but some common things people do that uh, you know, are hard for grieving people, um, is, ignoring that grief. Again, we've spoken about that. Pretending their persons never existed. A lot of people kind of don't bring up their person's name anymore or don't ask about them, but often grieving people really want to, like, remember a memory of their person and talk about them and share things they, would have done in this situation, or share things that they like. Um, so don't shy away from their person. Um, Rushing the grieving process, offering these cliches, we spoke about that. Um, Making the grieving person kind of support. Oftentimes people will come over and they'll kind of start crying or bringing this heavy weight. Really the grieving person is the one that needs that support. Um, yeah, disappearing again after the initial contact. We talk about that. Grief does, people tend to think, oh, it's been like, a couple weeks or a couple months. They're probably feeling okay now. Don't want to mention the grief, or, I don't want to, make things worse for them. Uh, it is, really important to keep being there for support and giving them that space to talk about grief if they want to, and not kind of shying away, right after, or months or weeks after uh, their death of their person. Um, yeah, advice was barely on the list of the needs of grieving people. It's really not something they want. It's not helpful to really give advice too much. There are very specific situations. Maybe if you've also gone through a very specific type of loss that they're also experiencing, and something has worked really well for you. But generally, just being there, listening, offering other types of support, the ones I spoke about, are much more helpful than trying to offer any type of advice. Okay, yeah, this is a really good one. Communicating needs. So, it does suck to be the grieving person and then have to kind of like educate people about how you're feeling and what they should be doing, while you're also grieving. It is difficult, but, I can tell you, it is also very helpful. It's unfortunate you're in that situation, but, our culture really doesn't understand grief. So, kind of naming those specific things that would be helpful for you is really good. I don't need advice. I just need someone to listen. Um, Please don't avoid saying my person's name. It helps when you check in even months later. It's okay to set these boundaries. Um, and for supporters too, it's okay to not know what to do. Um, it's okay to feel uncomfortable around grief and feel awkward around grief. So, asking, hey, like, what can I do that you find helpful? you know, and getting that information from your person who's grieving, so that you can do what works for them if you have the capacity to offer support. Um, So, okay. Um, you know, after the April 26th tragedy in Vancouver, I know there is a lot of community that's supporting in so many helpful ways, and it warms my heart to see that support that's happening. And I'm sure a lot of these things are already happening. Um, but I've just come up with a few kind of specific things that people as a community can kind of gather together to support, a grieving person or grieving people, and put those forward here. So one of them is meal trains. Again, it's incredibly difficult to cook for yourself and to go shopping and to do all of that while you're in the depths of despair and grief. So offering, this comfort, this care at this time is like means a lot. People will remember that forever. There's this great website, mealtrain.com. There is like a paid subscription one, but there's a free one for just these kind of smaller things that you would use it for in this sort of situation, um, where it just helps you kind of like um, coordinate all of that with people, and if you get like 14 people together or something like that, or it doesn't really matter the amount, it's you can kind of coordinate a way of like once in a while you make the meal, you bring it to that person's house, and while they're in that really difficult early stages of grief, they're getting that sort of consistent support of those healthy meals, and getting that sense that like someone's there for them, someone cares. Obviously asking when's a good time to bring it to your house, asking about allergies, what they do like to eat. Um, Similar to it's difficult to make meals, it's difficult to take care of your household, and often things start to really pile up too. So finding some ways that you can help with a group of people to take care of some of the chores, like okay, on Wednesday Sarah's going to go over and she's going to do the garbage. On Thursday, Jake is going to go and he's going to kind of help uh, vacuum or walk the dog or go get some groceries or do some laundry, whatever it may be. This is massive. It's huge for people who are really, you know, devastated in grieving. So, obviously kind of dropping off and going, respecting their privacy, um, unless you're invited to stay. This is again something people remember and appreciate forever. And if you're able to organize something like that, hugely helpful. Um, if people want that, obviously asking first. Walk and listen buddies, I really like this. Maybe a different person, each different person has a different time or different day of the week. You kind of get together with a group of people, and then if the person wants someone to chat with or go for a little walk with, there's always someone on any particular day. And not really offering advice, no silver linings, just making space for whatever they want to talk about and listening. We offer walking groups at the Crisis Center of BC for suicide grief, and I can tell you from my experience running those, when you're walking with someone, there's something about that sort of bilateral stimulation, and you're not kind of just sitting there, face to face. It's just less intense, there's less pressure, and people feel a lot more comfortable sharing and being able to process and move through that grief. So this is really helpful as well. Even not in a community setting, but even just like helping your friend, individually who's grieving, if they're open to going for a walk, that can be really helpful. Okay, so for those of you with kids, I've got a little section around that, or kids or adolescents rather. Um, so it is absolutely normal for kids to be crying one moment and then, deep in grief and crying the next. This is called puddle jumping. It's normal for children to go through this. Some more normal reactions are, um, you know, running out of the room, sort of passively accepting information, um, showing no emotion at times, behaving hyperactively, avoiding the conversation, wanting to be with friends, playing. Okay. Children under 11 express grief differently. They may not know how to put those sort of deeper emotions into words. They're just kind of processing them and trying to make sense of them. They're not, able to sort of like talk about their emotions like a lot of people do. Um, so that is normal. You kind of have to meet them where they're at, and what that might look like. Reading children's books about grief. There's so many good ones out there about death and grief can be really helpful. Drawing, storytelling, looking at photos of their person, finding ways to memorialize their person, scrapbooking, planting a tree. These are all really helpful ways to express and work through grief for children. It's also normal for kids to regress a bit as well, not wanting to sleep alone, fearing that separation, having accidents. This is all normal as they feel sort of, less safe, less secure. Um, and kids often mirror their parents' grief too, so it's helpful to show them, what it means to grieve in a healthy way, and that does mean expressing your emotions too. People, again, I hear that a lot. I have to be strong for my kids, and I understand that, people may not want to be completely, falling apart in a sense and in front of their children, unable to, do anything. But some people take that also in the sense of like, I can't cry in front of my children at all. It's actually healthy for them to be able to mirror that and see those difficult emotions as well. And it's okay to cry in front of your children. Um, okay. It's important for children to know that grief is natural and a healthy part of life, that their thoughts and feelings and experiences are normal, and this is what's expected. When you're going through this, that you're really there to listen. You want to know about even the hardest parts of their grief. It isn't going to burden you at all. You're there when they're ready to talk. Adolescents, they're going through a lot at that age. They're already going through a lot, with their brain chemistry changing. So you may notice, huge outbursts. It may seem like there's something they're really angry about that's unrelated to the grief, but this still may very much be tied in with the grief. People often feel like their kids aren't talking to them enough. Are they grieving at all? Sometimes children at this age, prefer to kind of like hide their grief or grieve alone, or talk with their friends. But being ready for them and keeping that open communication for when they are ready to, those little bits of sharing is really helpful. Um, so, people are often wondering, okay, is this normal behavior right now? Is this because of their grief? Is it because of just their age and what they're going through? Oftentimes it's a mixture of both. Supporting children after a tragedy, for such as the April 26th tragedy, letting them know that while these events happen, people are working hard to keep everyone safe. It's very common for people to really have their sense of safety completely shattered. Um, Even when bad things happen, there's always more people, helping and wanting to do good in the world. Talking about this human need to care for each other, and most people choose to care and are compassionate. Um, Letting them know it's okay to feel sad, scared, angry, confused, whatever you're feeling makes sense. You're there for them to talk when they are ready. Talking about death with children. Um, Okay, unless they ask, you don't need to describe what happened in detail, just sort of, keeping things brief. avoiding euphemisms like they went to sleep. This can be confusing for children. Um, Letting them know, the facts that are appropriate for their age. They're going to hear about these things. It's better to hear about it from someone they can trust, like yourself, and watching out for cues that they've had enough information when you're talking to them. They might become distracted or start to look away, just checking in with them, not giving them too much all at once, but being honest with them as well. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go through this self-care section, which shouldn't take too long, and then we'll give you a couple of resources, and then we'll make space for some questions. So self-care. This is obviously, we hear this all the time. It's such a buzzword, and it's really hard to make space for yourself when you've got so many things going on in this incredibly busy world we live in. So, what does self care look like in this sort of situation? And it's important for grieving people to make space for self care and also people supporting grief because you can't really show up for other people unless you're showing up for your space, for yourself, unless you have that capacity to make space for for difficult emotions. Um, what does self care look like? So, being mindful during that time that we do have for ourselves, when you're preparing a meal, you're eating a meal, just being present, giving yourself, the grace to experience that moment, to be present with yourself, um, noticing when you're feeling, noticing your limits. I get it. This is so tough, right? Again, we live in a culture where it's like go, go, go. You have to be working all the time. We're guilty when we're taking any time for ourselves. Really allowing yourself, giving yourself that space. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need 10 minutes free of distraction. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk outside. Um, Really important. Reminding yourself you deserve it. So, we really have to convince ourselves because, everything else around us is telling us that we don't deserve it. We need to push ourselves when we're grieving. We need to push ourselves all the time. Even if you're not someone who's grieving, um, it's important to, we kind of have to convince ourselves, you are worth that time. Um, you do deserve to take time for yourself when you need it. Um, Yeah, think about consistent things you can do throughout the day. Schedule that into your day, even if you're someone who, uses a Google Calendar, put that in. I'm not doing anything during this time. I'm taking care of myself. Um, Nature, it uh, clinically shown to reduce stress and improve your mood. Yet we spend 93% of our lives indoors. Um, Make time to step outside. I've heard that stepping outside, and I've noticed this myself, without shoes is actually really connecting and grounding and helpful to reduce stress. It's been shown. So, give that a try too, out in the forest, in the beach. Not doing something, setting boundaries with ourselves. We've all been there. You're looking at your phone, 3 hours goes by, you're like, you're in this daze, you feel even more stressed out. um, Setting time limits for social media, being kind to yourself in that way too, not overloading your schedule. um, you got to be good to yourself, you got to take care of yourself. um, letting your body know that you care and that you are worth it. um, okay, so yes, common humanity. Suffering is part of life, and we all experience it. If we're feeling isolated in this suffering, it amplifies it far more. So seeking out people who care, friends, therapists, support groups. We got a lot of great resources, people you can vent with, you can talk through challenges with. This is really, really important. Okay, okay. Um, so let me ask people, think of something you can do for yourself each day, for the next few weeks that makes your life a little bit less stressful. Genuinely, like you don't. need to put this in the chat. Just this is just something you can say to yourself. You know, make a little promise to yourself. It could just be something small, something you're going to do for yourself. Okay, so uh, this slide I'll go through really quickly here, and we'll get to the questions. But at the Crisis Center of BC, we have several, if you're interested in ways that you can support people who are experiencing thoughts of suicide, who are experiencing crisis and in distress, if you want to be someone who helps in those situations, we have trainings for those. I will include that in an email to everyone in a couple days. So that information will be there as well. We also are hoping to create a future training for supporting people through suicide grief. So if you're interested in that, you can join our newsletter. I'll give you a link to join our newsletter. Sorry. Support resources 988. This is 24/7 text or call. You know, there's some stigma around calling these lines. Oh, like, you know, this line isn't for me. Like, oh, you know, I don't want to talk to a stranger. These people are so empathetic. This is what these people, you know, they truly care about what they're doing and they are there for you no matter what. You can call for any reason. You don't need to be in crisis. You don't need to be having thoughts of suicide, but you can call in those situations as well. And these people are trained. They know what they're doing. They're very empathetic. If you just need someone, even just need someone to talk to, give them a call. The Indigenous Crisis and Support Line is up there as well. BCBH, a British Columbia Bereavement Helpline, they are a support line that is specific for grief. So these people are trained to support grief and they are incredible. So if you just want to talk about your grief, if you want any sort of resources around grief, these are the people to talk to. They're wonderful, very helpful, very resourced. They know about all the resources anywhere in Canada, sorry, anywhere in British Columbia rather. You can, and I'll send these all out too in the email. You can email myself at any time at bereavement@crisiscenter.bc.ca. We have a lot of great resources for suicide griefs in specific. Um, and I'll tell you about some of the things that we offer as well. The BC Bereavement Helpline also offers an 8-week suicide grief support group and a homicide support group as well. You can email them, contact@bcbh.ca. I'll send that out in the email. Safer through Vancouver Coastal Health offers 8 weeks of no-cost one-on-one suicide bereavement counseling if you're experiencing your own thoughts of suicide as well. Mygrief.ca, if you're someone who likes to do this kind of stuff online, then they're great as well. They have modules for suicide grief. They have modules for all different types of grief, and you can learn a lot and work through a lot of stuff there for free. So these are our resources at the Crisis Center that we offer for suicide grief specifically. On the third Wednesday of every month, we have an online gathering called the Cup of Tea for the Soul, which I facilitate. Where we have, you know, share, we support one another, we have, you know, various mindfulness exercises. Take a walk with us the first Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 12. We meet at Pacific Spirit Park, where we walk in nature with others who understand the unique grief of suicide. Again, I'll send all of the ways to register for this out. We have an 8-week suicide grief support group as well that has a sliding scale. So whatever you're able to pay, you pay. So there's extremely low barrier services. Again, I also work as a counselor at the Vancouver Hospice Society. We offer 6 free one-on-one grief counseling sessions for people who live in Vancouver, Vancouver proper. So you can email us. I'll add that into the email as well. We have various types of support groups specific to different types of loss, including a trauma loss group. And this would be helpful for the people you know, after the April 26th tragedy. And we also have, you know, a parental loss, sibling loss, child loss, you know, various different types of support groups. So this is a really helpful resource. We also have grief walking groups as well, and all of this is free. Um, okay, okay. So uh, we'll do a little bit of a grounding just after, but I just really want to make a bit of space because we only have a couple more minutes here for some questions. So, um, sorry, I was hoping to make a little more space for questions. Um, so I'm just gonna take just a minute here to read some of them because I just want to make sure I'm answering those questions that I'm able to answer, and for those I didn't get to, I'll make sure I answer them in the email that goes out to everyone. Okay, we keep referring to their person. Is it possible to feel the same levels of grief over pets? I love this question. Absolutely, 100%. And yes, actually, British Columbia Bereavement Helpline offers pet support loss groups as well, and it is, I feel like in our culture, maybe people might insinuate that it's a less valid grief, but I just want to say right here, it is just as valid. You can feel just as a painful and difficult heartbreak after a loss of a pet. In fact, in the literature that I've read, people often uh, feel that pets offer the greatest amount of grief support over anyone. So, we can have the most deep, special connection with our pets, and it absolutely is just as valid experiencing all these things I spoke about over the loss of your beloved pet as well. Duh, duh, duh. Does the one-on-one grief counseling through the Vancouver Hospice Society have a virtual option? Yes, absolutely. So we offer in-person, online as well. And you can just state that preference in your intake, and we'd be happy to support with that. So after almost 2 years, when my grief gets me, it has been feeling like a squashing and intense tightening feeling when I cry it out lately. This seems to be a new feeling for me. It is very overwhelming and intense, like every muscle in my body is being tensed at the same time to the point of like a strangulation of myself. Is this normal? Well, so grief is very much felt in the body in so many ways, and we just feel it in all our muscles, deep in our soul, and I've heard of this being experienced. That being said, I'm not a medical professional, so I don't want to say indefinitely. Maybe it would be helpful to bring this up with a doctor as well, but I can tell you as well, you're not alone in experiencing that for sure. Um, I have a client whose hoarding behavior got intense due to the grieving process that lasts for 7 to 8 years. Understanding that grief can last forever. How can a clinician support this type of client? Thanks. Okay, so I don't work specifically with hoarding, but I know that hoarding is a way for people to get a sense of comfort and control. Oftentimes when they have been traumatized, or they have gone are extremely gone through something extremely difficult. So hoarding is for sure normal in these situations, but I can't speak specifically on how to support through that, but I do appreciate the question. Um, what is the most important quality for a grief counselor to have that differs from other counselors? Oh, that is such a great question. I love that. Um, I think being able to genuinely, so much of the people who come in for grief counseling, truly have not had the space to kind of open up and really discuss their grief, and being able to genuinely be sort of captured by their story, show them that you genuinely care, that you're not as afraid to shy away from those really deeper feelings that others have often sort of moved away from, is a really critical component, and just understanding about grief more, because a lot of people have these sort of cultural sort of assumptions that can be really harmful. So working through some of those and dismantling them can be like a huge weight off of a lot of people. Um, Okay, so I think that's the majority of the questions there. If there's any others that I missed, I'll make sure to answer them um, in the follow-up email. So yeah, I am so grateful for everyone coming out here and taking some time to learn about grief. Before we go, I know this is a really heavy topic, so let's just take a quick moment to ground ourselves, to help ourselves be present in this moment here. So let's just get comfortable wherever we're sitting. Just kind of loosen our muscles a little bit. Just feel our feet planted on the floor. Allow our bodies to get into a bit of a comfortable position. Close our eyes and just take a couple of nice deep breaths. Go in and out, in and out. And I'd like to ask everyone to put their hand over their heart and say something to yourself internally, something you know you deserve to hear, something kind and loving and compassionate. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It means a lot to have you here. And again, uh, I'll send out an email to everyone, and you can email me back if you have any further questions. Um, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Take care, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Bye.